What's up, YouTubers? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Follow the Money. I have great news. Today we're going to talk about President-elect Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus plan, which he refers to the Rescue America plan, and see how that will benefit us in the coming months. Now, this measure is supposed to be urgently reviewed and passed, I would say, in the next 30 days or so. So we could be expecting more direct stimulus payment checks very soon. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel to stay updated on stimulus check info. I like to get straight to the point without all the fluff. And if you're that person that likes to get straight to the point, you found the right channel. Go ahead and like the video if you find this content helpful, and any contributions you'd like to make, go ahead and comment below. I want to know your opinion and how you think this third stimulus check and Rescue America economic plan will help us. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about with Biden's plan is the $1,400 checks, right? That's the most important part of the bill for most struggling Americans who need money now. Okay, so $1,400 checks, which were supposed to be $2,000, but we already received, well, some of us, our stimulus checks are still being delayed. I have plenty of videos on updates of stimulus payment delays for that. But since he was originally going to propose $2,000 and most Americans have already been paid the $600, he's proposing a direct payment to Americans for $1,400. And I'm assuming that this is going to be rolled out and we should receive the payment, I'm thinking, by late February, early March, because the unemployment benefits for the stimulus plan that was just passed in December of 2020 is already going to run out mid-March. So they have to get this passed before that runs out. So your timeline is within the next 30 to 45 days. I'm thinking you should receive these checks. You want to take the time out now, guys, and make sure that your address is correct with the IRS. Make sure you file your 2020 taxes as soon as you get your 1099 and W-2s and all your, documents prepared, because they are probably going to say that in order to receive this stimulus check, you're going to have your 2020 taxes filed. So get that out the way so that you're not waiting for that check. Make sure your address is up to date, your banking information is up to date, all that good stuff. So we have less delayed stimulus checks next round. All right, so that's the great news regarding the direct payment. All right, so let's talk about this $10,000 student loan forgiveness rumor that's been going about. Now, I listened to Joe Biden's total speech on his $1.9 trillion package. He did not mention once student loan forgiveness. So I don't know where people are getting this from. I put the link to his full stimulus speech in the description below. You guys, make sure you check that out. But he never mentioned that he would forgive $10,000 in student loan debt. But there are various news articles circulating around the internet stating that that is so. But since he didn't say it, I don't know if it's true. So that we're going to just say is a rumor right now. Again, there's no reference to that in his speech. An aide for the administration, Biden's administration, said last week that Biden would give borrowers more time before they have to resume their payments as far as the student loan payments. Remember, we were able to do a whole year pause on payments because of the pandemic. Well, the vast majority, or around 90% of federal student loan borrowers, have taken advantage of a government's option to pause their payments, right? But Joe Biden mentioned nothing about when that pause would expire or if it's going to be extended in his speech. So there's always a couple of things that we need to raise alarms on as far as student loan debt goes, because we don't want that pause to expire and then we get late payment marks on our credit reports. We don't want that at all here on Follow the Money. So make sure that you are in contact with your servicer for your student loans if you do have a pause, and make sure that you ask them if there's an expiration date to stay on top of your finances. All right. The next part of the stimulus package I want to talk about is the minimum wage could rise to $15. After holding steady at about $7.25 for more than a decade, the federal minimum wage would rise to $15 per hour under this proposal, which would also end the tipped minimum wage and sub-minimum wage for people with disabilities. That's great. Many states and localities have already raised their own wage floors for minimum wage, so it's not clear how quickly the higher wage would phase in. I know in Minnesota they did it, but I don't even know if it's phased in yet, because once they pass the bill to raise it to $15, it could take several years to actually become $15 an hour. So that's a whole nother video in itself. So $350 billion in emergency funds for state, local, and territorial governments too, you guys. So again, $15 an hour minimum wage. Now the next thing I want to talk about here is money for reopening schools. Our children have been out of school for the most part for almost about a year now, and we want to know when they're going to be able to go back to school. So Biden's proposal calls for $130 billion to help schools reopen safely, $35 billion in funding for higher education, and $5 billion for governors to use to support educational programs for those hardest hit by COVID-19. So when they say open up schools safely, in Biden's speech, he mentioned that he wanted to have the proper safety equipment like sanitation, liquids and shields and masks, even COVID-19 testing in the school. I don't know how much of that I personally agree with, but he wants to have all those safety measures in place before reopening the schools. And that's going to cost billions of dollars, because they're going to have to do that for every school in the United States. And that's only K through 8. There's a lot of articles online circulating that he's going to do this K through 12. No, he says specifically in his speech, K through 8. Okay, what about high school, as you might ask, right? Is the obvious question. Well, in Minnesota, I don't know about you guys' states, we're not even mentioning reopen high schools. We're just reopening elementary schools, K through 8. That's it. So what I've learned is that a lot of high schools are being used for mass vaccination hubs. What are mass vaccination hubs? They are going to be transformed. They're going to be public buildings like schools and stuff like that have been closed for some time. Even stadiums, you guys. They're going to use stadiums for this too. And they're going to bring in military medical staff to administer COVID-19 vaccines to the general public as they become available. As you know, on the news, we're almost done to our last week of vaccinating those most vulnerable, the elderly, and the healthcare workers. And now we're going to move into vaccinating the general public. Since they're not even talking about vaccinating children, I think that is the reason why K through 8 gets to go back to school. Okay, but I think high schoolers, that age range might be on the next 3 to 6 months vaccination rollout. So that is probably why they're not going to reopen, and they're not going to let them go back to school so they can use the public school buildings as vaccination hubs. In New York, they've already got 28 mass vaccination hubs. The first one that opened was in Queens, New York. And they plan on vaccinating 1,000 to 5,000 people a day as the vaccines become available. The vaccines are supposed to be free. The U.S. government just gave, in that last stimulus package in December 2020, $68 billion for the vaccine programs. $20 billion of that went straight to the vaccine manufacturers to pay the bill for giving Americans the vaccines free. That's $20 billion. So is the vaccine really free? Probably not. If we already paid $20 billion on the back end, and that's going against our national debt, so the vaccines are definitely not free. Do you really think that the owners of Moderna and Pfizer sat around the table one day and said, let's make a free vaccine for everybody to ensure that they're healthy and safe and the pandemic doesn't spread? No, they created a vaccine, and they knew that they were going to get the funding from the government, so they got a huge paycheck and a payout. So it's definitely not free. They got paid to create these vaccines. Anyways, let's move on to the next one here. So along with schools reopening, They also expanded emergency paid leave for employees. Now, Biden is calling for changes. His team says will expand paid sick leave to 106 million more Americans, including renewing the expired requirement for employers to provide leave and expanding emergency paid leave to federal workers. So if you have to care for yourself being sick or a loved one, you have to take off 10 to 14 days. That is going to be mandatory paid with these funds set aside for employers to pay people to be off work to take care of themselves and their sick loved ones. So that is good. Another one here that's really important is they plan on extending unemployment insurance. Under the current stimulus package that was just passed in December, the unemployed are eligible for an additional $300 weekly of federal unemployment benefits through March 14th. So that means that if you were getting $1,000 a week from your employer, you lost your job, your state unemployment will give you $500. They give you 50% of your salary, right? And then the federal government's going to step in and give you $400 extra dollars to put on top of that. So you'll be making $900, only $100 less than the $1,000 you were making when you were employed. So that extra $400 is going to surpass the extra $300 that was just passed. So you'll get the $400 instead. And that's actually going to go from March through September. So that unemployment package will last through September. And it also, they're expanding the people who are eligible to receive unemployment to independent contractors and freelancers. So if you were a freelance painter or independent contractor for a company, you actually can apply for unemployment now. So they've expanded eligibility. That is awesome. Okay, let's talk about housing assistance. The president-elect plan calls for an extending eviction and foreclosure moratoriums through September. That's great because they said that millions of people were on the brink of either being evicted or losing their home, and this is the rescue aid that's going to help them stay in their homes. The plan is directing $30 billion towards rental assistance and $5 billion in emergency assistance to secure housing for the homeless. That is interesting. As more details come about, we're going to see how exactly they're going to use that $5 billion to assist homelessness, which is a big problem in our country. So I want to know exactly how that's going to play out. And as I get more details, I'm going to post more videos on these different the different staples of this stimulus package so that we have all the information possible. Food benefits. All right, so the plan includes extending the 15% increase in SNAP benefits through September. That's like food stamps, food benefits for families. Investing $3 billion in the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for WIC and providing U.S. territories with $1 billion in nutritional assistance. So WIC is being provided, and an increase in SNAP benefits and nutritional assistance for those who need food. Child care assistance. This is always a big one because child care costs have been through the roof since the year 2000. It's very expensive to put a kid in daycare. So this help that Biden's offering in his stimulus plan calls for $25 billion emergency stabilization funds for child care providers and an additional $15 billion to the Child Care and Development Block Grant Program. So the Block Grant Program helps people who fit certain income criteria get child care assistance. It'll pay for all of it or a huge portion of costs for child care for those types of families. However, I think that they need to expand the eligibility for the Block Grant child care program because it should be expanded up to like $60,000 annual income because middle class people or people who are making, $40,000 to $60,000 a year, they have the toughest time paying for daycare because they don't really get help any other way. And so the daycare is a really big bill for them. And I think they definitely need to look at that block grant and expand it. Don't just add money to it, expand the eligibility so that more people who make a little more money but still struggle can qualify for that program, which is very, very important. Okay. Tax credits for children and low-income workers. The plan expands the child tax credit. Another important one for Democrats, to $3,000 per child up to age 17 and $3,600 for child under age 6. Wow. And it increases the earned income tax credit from about $530 to $1,500 and expands eligibility. I want to know more about the expanded eligibility for that earned income tax credit, because a lot of people, rely on that during tax time. I want to know exactly how that's going to be expanded as far as eligibility. And we're going to do a whole video on that once I uncover the details of that. All right. So $3,000 per child for the child tax credit. So if you have 3 children under the age 17, you can get $9,000 back. $9,000 off your taxes. Okay, that is awesome. What is the current child tax credit? Is it about $1,500 or $2,000? So that's a big increase right there, you guys. That's huge. Okay, support for small businesses. Biden is proposing $15 billion in grants to hard-hit small businesses and leveraging $35 billion in government funds into $165 billion in loans and investments in small businesses. So support for state and local government as well. So Biden's going to plan calls on Congress to provide $350 billion in funds for state, local, and territorial governments. Geez, this is a rescue plan. It's framed as money that will help pay frontline workers, reopen schools, and get people vaccinated. Yes, mass vaccination hubs, guys. Remember that. It also requests $20 billion in relief for public transit agencies and $20 billion to support tribal government pandemic response. All right. That's the opening bid. And some Democrats want to go bigger. So some of them want a $3 trillion or $4.5 trillion package. This one that Joe Biden just proposed on Thursday, January 14th, 2021 is $1.9 trillion. Geesh. 3 to 4.5 trillion they want to propose? Even more? Okay, so there's something that they wanted to... Some Democrats are kind of split on what they want to add to make it. So what would they add on to Biden's already proposed plan to make it even more bigger? So discussions are underway among Democrats and progressives inside and outside the legislative process about how to do more. Senator Cory Brooks, the Democratic New Jersey representative, and Ayanna Pressley, the Massachusetts Democrat representative, sent a letter to Biden calling on his administration to push to include baby bonds in an economic recovery package. We urge you to go big with a bold vision for racial and economic justice. So the baby bonds are for racial and economic justice? How? They wrote to Biden arguing that baby bonds, which would create federally funded savings accounts for every child in America, represent a once-in-a-generation opportunity to close the racial wealth gap and unleash economic opportunity for every American. Okay, what do you guys think about that? Will that close the racial wealth gap? Let's see. What is a baby bond, first of all, for you guys who don't know? A baby bond is a fixed income security that is issued in small dollar denominations with a par value of less than $1,000. The small denomination enhanced the attraction of baby bonds to average retail investors. So it's a fixed income security. Are baby bonds a good investment? For investors seeking income, this is definitely a good thing. The yields of baby bonds are generally higher than what you'd get from bonds because of callability, potentially less consistent payments, and a lower spot in the hierarchy of claims to assets and equities. I would have to do more research on that to determine if that is going to close the racial wealth gap for children right now, you guys. I can't say that I agree or disagree at this point. So, student debt cancellation. We talked about that. There's one article on Vox saying that, and again, I didn't hear Joe Biden say this out of his mouth last night on his speech for the $1 trillion Rescue America package. But Vox.com has an article. They're saying that the student debt cancellation, an increasingly important issue on the left, is absent from Biden. Okay, they're saying it's absent too. Okay, so, but they're saying there's a rumor that it could be up to 50,000. That's 50,000, guys. Not 10,000. They're saying up to 50,000 in student loan debt, which is awesome. Okay, that's great news for a lot of people. So let's hope it's up to 50,000 and not just 10,000 if it really is a thing. So all we have to do now is wait for this to be passed. We have to do some budget reconciliation with the Senate and Congress, and hopefully within the next few weeks they'll be signing this into law with a couple of things added and a couple of things taken away. Who knows? We'll see what the final bill entails. I'll keep you guys updated here on Follow the Money. Thanks for tuning in.